Well, I think it's reasonably possible for India to maintain its current level of growth. Now, there are some variables, and obviously the variables will impact. Growth returning to the rest of the world itself is a variable. If it does, it's good for us. Oil prices, if they don't go out of control once again, I think, which they're not likely to, some minor increases we can absorb is fair enough for us. Domestically, if there's a good monsoon, as the indications by the Met Department are, I think it adds to our ability to improve upon the growth rates, which in turn can also improve on domestic demand, particularly rural demand. And that can help India's private sector, because private sector has been stressed. Of course, a lot also depends on how the current reform programs of the government continues. We are fairly determined to continue the reform program. And once progressive steps like the bankruptcy law, the GST, etc. are implemented, I think it can create a favorable environment in the general body of investors as far as India is concerned, increase economic activity in India, and certainly help us.
You mentioned the monsoon, Mr. Jaitley, but some people feel that India might be overstating the positive impact of a monsoon. What do you say to that?
No, I'm not overstating or understating the impact, but it's a harsh reality that in a country where a lot of land is rain-fed, agriculture depends on monsoon. It's not that agricultural production will very significantly increase the GDP. It will have a marginal impact. But the fact that it improves upon the purchasing power of the agricultural community as such, that spiral effect on the growth is much more, because there are some sectors which had slowed down over the years which will suddenly pick up.
Now, while the Indian growth story that you are projecting and the Indian government is projecting is one of things being rosy again, we recently had the RBI governor, Raghuram, Rajan, say that India is like a one-eyed king in the land of the blind. How do you respond to a statement like that?
See, I think if you look at the totality of the picture, if you look at the rest of the world faces a grim and a challenging situation. And this challenging situation in the world has slowed down global growth. And therefore, the world is certainly, from a point of view of growth, facing one of the most serious challenges. There is unpredictability. People don't really understand how long this phase will go on. And there's uncertainty. The level of ambition of economies to grow faster also has been scaled down significantly. Now, compared to the rest of the world, if you have a 7.5% growth rate or a little above that, I think India is doing remarkably well. For 2 years in a row, we've been the fastest growing major economy in the world. So I think we are doing well. But if we have a look at our own domestic challenges and the kind of challenges of poverty eradication particularly, and knowing our own potential, I think we have a potential to do better. And therefore, I had said it in my budget speech also, compared to the rest of the world, we are doing very well. But by our own standards, we ourselves are a little impatient. We'd like to do better.
You also talked about firewalls recently, that given the world economic situation, countries are putting up firewalls to protect themselves. What are the firewalls do you think India still has in place which might be an impediment?
I think exports have suffered. Because the global economy and global trade itself has shrunk. But then the kind of firewalls India needs in terms of protecting its currency, protecting its markets, reforming in order to make sure that slow growth doesn't spread to India, improving upon your ability of Indian banks to lend for growth, improving upon the stress in the India's private sector so that it can make a more significant contribution to growth. So your domestic systems will have to be put into shape to make sure that you can resist the global slowdown, because the global headwinds are not particularly helpful.
Now, going to the Provident Fund issue.
Why is there a disconnect? There seems to be a disconnect between one arm of the government and another
After your assurances in Parliament, why is the Labour Ministry even thinking about putting restrictions on Provident Fund withdrawals?
The Labour Minister has already addressed this program, this issue. I have seen it on the net today. I have not fully acquainted myself with the details because I've been travelling out, and therefore I'll look at it once I return to India.
But do you think just in policy, putting restrictions on Provident Fund withdrawals
I would not comment on an issue till I've examined it completely.
Well, with inflation well under control, do you think that the RBI has any outlook in terms of further cutting the rates?
I think the RBI would be in the best position to decide this. We must look at the totality of the picture. Since January 2015, we are now in April 2016. So in the last 16 months, you've had a 150 basis point cut. Now, part of it has been transmitted, part has to be transmitted, and therefore the direction is what is extremely important. And I think the central bank is following a correct direction.
Going to taxes, something that foreign institutional investors definitely look at. While we have talked about reducing tax terror in India, we've also seen recently that the government has moved against the Supreme Court against Vodafone's transfer pricing order. What do you make of that? And is that really sending a good signal when it comes to tax reform and tax policies in India?
Why should the government not file an appeal if it thinks there is an appealable order? There is no company in the world which is immune from paying taxation. There are important questions of law which go to the Supreme Court. This case has nothing to do with the retrospective tax issue.
At the same time, Finance Minister, even as you meet people in New York and DC, a lot of companies talk about tax issues in India and retroactive tax. So when they see the Vodafone case...
Tax is an issue of the past. It's an issue which the previous government has created. It's an issue which we have resolved. We have given... except the one or two cases which are pending, for which also we have given several options of resolving the issues. There can't be a principle, because if a company had once an issue of retrospective taxation, this company is immune from some other forms of taxation. So if there are legitimate issues with regard to other areas, it's between the company and the tax department to sort them out.
But even given what happened with Vodafone, would you project that in the future years, taxation in India is going to be more uniform and better suited towards companies' interests?
We want a predictable tax regime, and therefore that predictability of the tax regime is ensured by not having retrospective taxation. And that's a clear policy of the government which I have announced.
And in what other ways do you think, Minister Jaitley, have you been able to soothe nerves here abroad with regards to the tax situation in India?
I think people are investors are very competent, they're very clever people. They understand the sea change that has taken place in India, and I don't have to smoothen any nerves. Investors are very enthusiastic about India, they're very bullish about India.
State Bank saying that they will not give loans to the Punjab government over perceived missing food grains. How do you respond to that crisis, and what action do you plan to take?
This is not a recent crisis. Over the last few decades, literally, there has been some accounting issue which has to be tallied between the Food Corporation of India, the Punjab government and the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. And because that issue has been pending for very long, we have been trying to resolve that issue, because suddenly it comes up every year till those accounts are settled. I think at some stage between the Punjab government and the Food Corporation of India will require some mechanism to sort out the accounting issue.
But is there any fear that this could become a little bit more systemic and spread to other states as well?
See, in any warehousing activity, if you take accounts after a period of 20 years, what has gone into the warehouse and what has come out of the warehouse, you will have some accounting issues. It's an accounting issue of that kind which has been pending between the Punjab government and the Food Corporation of India. It's come up in the last 2 years on several occasions, and I think it's about time that we have some mechanism to tally those accounts.
Moving to the Mallya case, now that the non-bailable warrant has been issued, how will the government, or does the government ensure that Mallya will return to India and that he will face authorities?
On the court procedures, you have investigative agencies looking into criminal law matters, you have banks looking into their settlement matters, and I think both are extremely competent institutions. who will act strictly within the parameters of law. As far as the banks are concerned, it's their responsibility based on commercial considerations to make sure that no defaulter manages to get away merely by escaping the geographical boundaries of India. You don't run away from liabilities that you owe to the public system.
But given that you're saying that, Mr. Jaitley, do you think it's important then to make an example of the Mallya case and send a strong signal to defaulters?
What else are the investigating agencies and the banks doing? After all, they are sending a very strong signal that the public debts owed to commercial banks, you can't just run away from the liability if you have a responsibility to pay. And the banks will ensure that the banks are reimbursed.
Now, on this trip, and also I think on previous occasions, India has taken up the issue of H1B visa hike with the government. But do you think the US government will actually take some steps to respond to your request, or is it now just a policy of overprotectionism?
It's our responsibility to and our duty to bring this to the knowledge of the US government for the simple reason that this discrimination, particularly qua India, and therefore Indian IT professionals have a lot to pay. And in very clear terms, we've told the US administration this is for them to take a decision now. It's their sovereign matter.
And what was their response?
Well, they've heard us in and they say that they're acting within the framework of their law. But these are meetings in which you flag these issues eventually for resolution.
But do you think that overall protectionism, the climate of overprotectionism, is something that we'll just have to learn to live with?
Well, I think the climate of overprotectionism becomes more evident during an election. But our experience of the past has been that what is normally said in the campaigns is not exactly governmental agendas of the future. When you are in government, you become more reasonable.
Talking about reform, which you've also touched upon during your trip a lot, there is a feeling still that the reform process may have slowed down, and there are some important bills that may be, coming across hurdles.
There is no feeling to this effect because the reform process has been very consistent. Obviously, all reforms don't take place in a day. A government has a 5-year term, and as I've said, we have our hands full with a lot of reform agendas. Many have taken place in the last 2 years, and many are in the pipeline.
How confident are you then of the GST happening in the next?
The numbers are changing, and the numbers are changing for the better in the upper house, and I'm sure the GST will be passed sooner than later.
So if you have to make even a broad prediction, when do you think?
I won't make a prediction because these are political matters, and therefore politics follows its own logic.
Now, an RTI query has revealed that
Former Home Minister actually signed both the first and the second affidavit in the Ishrat Jahan case. Now, as a very important member of Modi's government and cabinet, do you think a fresh probe may be ordered in this case?
I'm not in touch with what's happening at home. But all I can tell you about this case is that it's absolutely unconscionable that a government at that particular period of time should have investigated India's premier intelligence agency in a case where a terrorist group is liquidated in an encounter. National security was very seriously compromised. And all evidence now seems to be suggesting that this was done for overt political reasons.
But given the national security importance, as you say, do you think a fresh probe would probably be the right thing to do?
To comment here on this sitting in a foreign soil, I'm sure people at home will take a view of it.
At the conclusion of this trip to the United States, what are the main takeaways as you head back?
These are trips. We've had a bilateral with the United States. We've interacted with their industry. We've interacted with the general body of investors. And I think people are extremely excited about India. People are looking at India. People see India as one of the few isolated spots in the world, which is doing well in the midst of global slowdown. And therefore, I think the focus on India is very much there.
Well, talking about investors, one of the big concerns for them has been stressed balance sheet of public sector banks in India.
It's an issue which the government has been in the process of seriously addressing for the reason that, and this has been taken up by the investors at various stages, we have to address the causes of that stress, and we have to empower the banks in order to make recoveries. Now, both these areas we are taking significant steps forward. The bankruptcy law is in its final stages, and I hope to see it through very soon.
So you're saying then that you're still confident about India being a bright spot?
India is doing very well, and that the world acknowledges that.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.